And we are live at Story Strategy Live. This is episode 43, Dawn and Nancy. And today we're going to be talking about writing sex scenes, or what if my mom reads this? Hi, Dawn.
Hi. I'm so excited about this show. This is going to be fun.
Yes, I told my family they're not allowed to come upstairs for the next hour. That probably won't work, but...
I mentioned, my family is always at the other end of the house when we're doing the show anyway, but the other night at dinner, I mentioned to my 17-year-old son,
oh, no.
I was like, hey, I know you're not normally around when we're doing the show anyway, but we're going to be talking about writing. And I basically got out, we're going to be talking about writing about se. And he's like, I'll be in my room.
Just tell me when you're done.
Yeah, he's like, I'll be in my room. That noise you hear will be the video game turned up as loud as it can be. I will put on my headphones. I do not need this in my life.
I know. Well, I made the mistake of telling my husband, and he was like, oh, do you want me to come up and help? I was like, no.
No, we
because
don't need
I feel
that.
like I could be a resource for you. I'm like, we don't need, no.
We're good.
Don't.
We're good.
Yeah.
So. Well, and I was going to share that as we were preparing for this show this week, and I was writing the blog post that we put up, and then we're working on the notes for this. One of the things that I had said was, that most authors aren't necessarily uncomfortable writing sex scenes. They're uncomfortable writing sex scenes poorly.
Yeah.
And I have two friends that every morning, two writing friends that every morning for years, we text each other like good morning gifts and hey, have a good day and that kind of stuff.
Nice.
And we just keep each other on track. And so I was not paying attention to the fact that I had not copied the GIF I wanted to put into the text because I was texting on my Mac, that I hadn't copied the GIF, that I had copied and pasted part of the notes I was writing.
Oh no.
And so at 8 o'clock in the morning for both my friends, it pops up with a message that just says, most authors aren't uncomfortable writing about sex. They're uncomfortable writing about sex poorly.
And they're like, that's weird.
They're like, it is 8 o'clock, Dawn. And one of them just replied with Deep Thoughts by Dawn Alexander.
That's hilarious.
Like, what are you doing?
You were practicing.
So I was writing this blog post. I'm sorry. Here's a little happy little bunny waving, saying good morning. That's what you were supposed to get. But
that was a good blog post too. I think it was really informative and very concrete, like practical.
Good. I hope it's helpful.
Yes, you'll notice I still have not gotten mine written or posted, or it does not exist. It's been a couple of weeks.
It's just been a week. So.
It's so weird, that day job thing that I have. It's like they expect me to do stuff right now. Like,
don't they know that you've got writing about sex to prepare for? I mean,
I try to really not cross the streams, but yeah. So telling my boss, well, I do this live thing on Thursday afternoons, so I can't work for you.
And you don't understand, the authors need this one. They need to know about this one.
Yes. So, all right. Well, let's dive in, shall we?
We shall. So we're going to be talking about some practical strategies. We're going to try to give y'all some actual that you can use this type things. And then we're also going to talk about the anxiety of having somebody else read it.
Yes, like your mom.
Yeah.
Or in my case, my uncle, who's like super support. He's not even he's my husband's uncle, really. Super supportive of my whole writing career, but he reads every book I put out. But at Thanksgiving, like 2 years ago, he was like, hey, I really liked your latest. And I was like, oh, thank you. And he was like, are you especially like the sex parts? And I was like, no.
This is not okay.
We're not going to have this conversation anymore.
No, this is done. This is weird.
Okay, bye.
Well, my mom was a huge reader. And especially when she retired, she would read like 2 or 3 books a day.
Oh, wow.
And so I was all nervous. I'd finally like completed a manuscript. I printed it off for her, had it all set, and gave it to her. And her response was, there wasn't enough sex in this for it to be a romance. So what is it? It's like, so that's creepy. I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Yeah, I think well, we'll get there. I think that's the last thing we're talking about tonight, but I have some mental strategies for dealing with that stuff.
Yes.
All right.
So we're starting with heat levels.
Yeah.
Let's define some heat levels.
All right. So yeah, we get this question a lot. And I think in Romancelandia in general, there's some debate about what different terms mean. And when I say debate, I do not mean agreement. The terms sweet and clean, I think, are pretty straightforward, although people get upset about sweet sometimes. So, and clean too, actually, because if something's clean, that means something else is dirty, right? And dirty is derogatory. And so, still, those get used a lot. So sweet and clean generally means there is no sex on the page. Depending on how dramatically you want to interpret it, there may not be kissing. So know your comps, understand what book you're writing and where you're going to market it, and follow the expectations. So if you're trying to, write YA sweet and clean, and you're going to be Anne-Marie Meyer, then I don't think there's even kissing, maybe very nice kissing, but know what you're doing. Make sure you've read in the area you're targeting. So that's sweet and clean. Nothing happening on the page, really. And then what do we go? Steamy, sexy, and then erotic? Or I don't know if sexy is really a category. But steamy, I think, implies that there will be sex. But there's a huge spectrum. So it could be anything from, and then we walked up to my apartment. He kissed me against the door. You might describe that a bit. And then, we stumbled into the bedroom and he had his way with me, or, whatever. So that is sex.
I was deflowered.
Yeah, that's sex on the page. And that wouldn't happen in sweet and clean. So, but it's not anywhere near, and then his hand did,
Yes.
It's not explicit by any means, right? So I think steamy runs the gamut there. And then erotic, the whole story is about sex. So you are describing parts and pieces and movements and noises and everything you can think of that goes along with the whole full meal deal. That's erotic.
Right.
Is that I missed stuff?
I kind of relate it to back when I was teaching, there was a home ec teacher who taught across the hall from me, and we were teaching 7th and 8th grade. And this was back in the late 90s. And so somebody had taken a picture out of a magazine and glued it into the back of one of her textbooks. Mm-hmm. And it was from a magazine that you generally wouldn't expect a 14-year-old to have had. Oh. And so we were talking about it in the teacher's lounge, as you do. And this woman was the sweet little, you totally would have expected her to be teaching home ec. She had 6 kids,
oh my God.
The whole very motherly type. And everybody was kind of tiptoeing around what was actually in this picture.
Had everybody seen it, or they wanted to know? Okay.
No. And there was somebody at the table who was like, I don't understand. And finally she goes, okay, look, there were boy parts and there were girl parts, and they were touching in new and creative ways. And so I think the levels of that conversation kind of fit, starting off with us saying there was a picture and it was inappropriate and it didn't fit the thing. That would be the sweet and clean of, we're not going to tell you anything actually happened, to the point where she finally was like, okay, this part was here and this part was there, and that's what was going on, Right. So with the erotic, and I think with steamy, like you said, it runs the gamut. And I think in contemporary right now, contemporary romances, they're covering that whole continuum.
And so just like with sweet and clean, I would recommend know who your comps are. Who do you write like? Who are you thinking your book should be sitting next to on the bookshelf? And then read their books and figure out where they fall on that continuum. And that's what you're targeting.
Right. Because they have everything from the fade to black, close the door, that kind of thing, to words that I didn't realize existed.
Well, yeah, think about the fact that Sierra Simone and Eva Charles are in the same category as Melanie Harlow or I do read. I'm just drawing a total blank on names. Megan Quinn, Delancey Stewart.
Yes.
And so there really is a very broad spectrum. But I wanted to address one other thing, just kind of because of the way that you talked about that picture in the home ec textbook, because there was almost a sense that some of the teachers, were very like, what's the word, scandalized. And
yes.
And so I think before you can effectively write a sex scene, you have to consider, how do you feel about sex scenes in books? And, where do you fall in terms of judgment? Because if you really are uncomfortable about the idea of reading graphic sex, then you should not write it. And if you don't like naming body parts, you should not be doing that in your book. So don't push yourself into a category where you are not holistically comfortable. Does that make sense?
Right. It's very important that you find your comfort level. And if your comfort level doesn't match what you think the market is, I've had more than one author tell me, well, there's a sex scene in there because there has to be a sex scene in there because sex is what sells. Bad sex doesn't sell.
No, and your readers will be able to tell.
Yeah, it shows if you're not comfortable. You do not want it to be bad. You do not want it to be boring. You do not want it to.
If you think that sex is like dirty and something that we shouldn't be talking about, then you should not be writing it. Like, don't throw it in because you think it's
right, sweet and clean. That's fine.
There's a huge market for that.
Yes. And I think certain things that, and as we said, this is going to get a little PG-13, so little ears might not want to be around for this. But I think certain aspects of it, if you are not comfortable with BDSM, do not write BDSM just because 50 Shades took off.
Yeah.
That's not going, when I'm trying to think how to say this politely. Sometimes when people write BDSM and they don't enjoy it or they don't do their research, it comes off as judgmental. And it can come off as condescending, and that's not what you're looking for.
Or as almost torturous, where they have misunderstood the dominant role and they take it a little further than it. I don't know. I think you have to really understand what you're writing about if you're going to go for fetish.
And then there's some other, like, certain positions that if you are not familiar with that, first of all, you have the internet, good luck. But and I'm not saying you have to have done everything you write about, because most people probably haven't in these romance novels, because some of it, which we'll get into in a little bit, you're kind of like, how did you, you're going to be sore tomorrow. That's all I got to say about that. Yeah. But you need to be kind of familiar with the practicalities of it and familiar with, this is how this works, and this is how this feels, or this is, and so you either need to kind of educate yourself by reading some descriptions of that. I mean, if you're comfortable watching the videos of it, that kind of thing. It's all research. It's perfectly fine.
Well, with little things too, like I always get annoyed when the man ties off the condom afterwards, because in my experience, that has never happened. And I can't imagine why he'd be like, and when I have to tie a water balloon, I have to use my teeth to tie a knot in a balloon. And I'm like, trying to picture this.
Let's not do that.
No, but I quizzed my reader group. Like, have you ever witnessed anyone doing this? Like, you don't need to tell us whether it was you, but as far as this has actually happened. And I think it was some of my European readers were like, yeah. They're just like, are your condoms longer? Like, ow.
And they're going to be like, of course
yeah, they are. So, I mean, that's neither here nor there, but think about that kind of stuff.
Right.
And don't.
My other favorite on that, as long as we're just talking about that, is the ripping the panties.
Oh, yeah.
They don't rip that easy.
Have you ever tried? How thin were those panties, man?
Right. Well, and there's two things that bother me about that. And don't get me wrong. Certain situations, go for it, dude. That's awesome. But one, there's a reason why paramedics carry special scissors to cut clothes off. His fabric does not tear that easy. And two, those kind of panties are expensive.
I know, right?
So back off the ripping them into shreds. You can slide them down.
Have her acknowledge once that happens. Like, do you know how much I spent on those?
I'm sorry, everything has to stop. You just ripped my $30 panties. So.
You owe me now.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we were talking about finding your comfort level. I think it's important to find that comfort level and to accept where you're at. And that also goes for if you are comfortable writing at the far end of the erotic spectrum and that fits your book, go for it. Don't hold back because you're worried about what people are going to think. Let them think you have a pleasure dungeon. That is absolutely fine.
Well, and what people are we talking about? Are we talking about your readers? Because if they're reading it, shouldn't they be worried about what you might think?
In my experience, and again, we'll get to this again a little bit later, but in my experience, people get very worried about like what people at the PTA and their neighbor and that kind of thing are going to think. Now, there are some situations where you have a legit reason to be concerned. For example, I was in education for a really long time, and there are people who have been fired because they found out they were writing heavily erotic literature, and we have a moral clause in our contract. And there's people who have been let go because of that. So there's some times when you actually have to be concerned about that kind of thing. But you've got to kind of weigh that and figure out if that's a real concern or if that's a false concern.
Right. And there are ways around stuff like that, but
and we'll get to that. But ways to find your comfort level. That's where we're at.
All right, let's do that.
First of all, if you're not feeling it, the reader's not going to feel it, and you want the reader to feel it. That's the whole point. And so if we talked about if you're writing something that doesn't appeal to you, a good way to find what does and does not appeal to you is to read a heat level above what you think you want to write. And so if you were thinking, okay, I'm going to write contemporary, I want to write on the heat level of like Delancey Stewart and Melanie Harlow and Megan Quinn. If you're thinking I'm going to write there, then you read something a little bit above that. And then what you're writing suddenly doesn't seem that weird and uncomfortable, because if you read up a little bit, eventually you're going to hit a point where you're like, oh, okay, yes, I found my line.
Right.
I'm going to move back down now. And so you kind of find that sweet spot there. The other part you have to think about is when you're looking at your comfort level and what you want to write about in these is you have to look at the reader expectations. And I think that's kind of huge right now.
Huge. Well, and I think it's huge in the sex scenes for sure, but in general, if you're writing romance, understand why your readers are coming to your specific book. And it's everything from the tropes to the length to this, the color of the characters to there are so many different reasons why readers will pick a specific book. And if they choose yours because they are led to believe it is a certain thing, then you don't make it something else. And that includes heat level.
Right. And that can go either way. And it can go of you disappoint them because I've read a couple of books where the tension is just amazing and the sexual chemistry is just amazing. And we get to the point of they have kissed, they open the door to the apartment, and then the door to the apartment closes and it's the next day. And I'm like, oh no. You need to rewind because I was here for this whole mess.
Well, so that's an interesting question though. Can you not build a ton of romantic tension if you're not going to show the consummation? Is that not still a good thing?
You can, but it's where you hit the tone and the promise of your premise. If you have got, for example, and it's how you build the tension. If you're building the tension with the looks and the accidental touches and all these inside feelings, and then it fits that you get this really hot kiss, and then, okay, all I'm getting is a hot kiss because the door is going to close. As long as that fits the tone of your book, that's great. It's where you have these moments of they're standing there watching the fireworks and the guy's standing behind her and she can feel exactly how interested he is in whatever's going to happen after this firework. And he's leaning down and whispering things into her ear that he's going to do to her as soon as they get home.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so you're like, yes, let's go home and break out the, chocolate syrup and the whipped cream. Let's go for this. And then the door closes and you're like, no.
Yeah. No, I think if there's like explicit language of any kind, or if any specifically sexual body parts get mentioned in the lead up, then it's an indication that there is going to be sex.
Right.
So then you have to. So don't talk about those things if you're not going to do that.
If you have setting up readers' expectation, even from the cover of your book, if you have a cover that is a shirtless man, or if you have a cover that's, they do the really kind of artistic couples where like you just see like their hands joined, or some of them I'm like, what is that her knee?
I know there's
what
like body parts together and you're like, which person is that? Yeah. There's some lace, there's some leather.
Right. Yeah. If you have that kind of cover and then you shut the door, then that's going to be a problem too.
Yeah.
Now,
so give your readers what they want.
Right. The opposite of that is if you have a cutesy little cover and there's, a dog and.
Yeah. If it's the beach and the inn on the cover.
Yeah. We're not expecting them to, throw down on the hardwood floor and use graphic language. So you got to know what your reader's expectation is. You got to know what they would consider over the top. You got to know what would frustrate them. And then, as we were just saying, the heat level has to match the rest of the book. And I've seen that go both ways. I've seen the heat level's been built up really well, and then all of a sudden they close the door, and you're kind of like, aw. I've also seen where the book basically reads like a Hallmark movie.
And then all of a sudden they're like, rah!
And then all of a sudden it's, and it's things that I can't say right now because of, but it's because I am not a prude by any means. I mean, some of the people we edit for, there's no way you could be a prude. So I'm definitely not oh my goodness, scandalized pearl clutcher. But I have actually been reading one where I turned the page and went, oh my God, because this guy who had not even said the word damn the entire thing was describing in very graphic, like Penthouse Forum style, what he was about to do to her. And I was like, you said, oh my gosh, just a second ago when like you stubbed your toe. Where did this come from?
You have to set that. I mean, it's an uphill climb, right? That tension building. So if you have not taken them out on a date where there's a lot of, innuendo floating around, then they should not be going to the next place together. I don't think.
Yeah, you gotta make it fit the tone of the book overall, plus the tone of the characters.
Yeah, so that was the next thing that we're going to start talking about is how, like, writing a sex scene is not just writing a sex scene. Like, it's not generic. It's not just, oh, I've got to write a sex scene. It's going to fit in here. It's specific to your characters and specific to your story. So what I mean by that is, if you've got a grumpy construction worker who barely says 3 words and is super hard to read, and then a very like vivacious and flirty party planner, and they're going to get together, then in the bedroom, you have to have a reason for the way they behave. Maybe he finally unleashes in the bedroom, and that's the first time that she really gets to see inside his heart. And she's actually really shy, and her vivaciousness is just a cover for the fact that she's really uncomfortable about her abdominal scar, or, who knows. But there has to be a reason why they behave the way they do in the bedroom, the same as there's a reason why they behave the way they do out in the world, right? So remember that motivation has to carry through, not just as they're walking around, but when you're thinking about building your story, think about what motivates them to get to the bedroom. How do they behave there? And what does that do for your plot? Because you don't just have...
It always changes things.
Yeah, and especially because when you take off your clothes with somebody, that makes you very vulnerable. And so there is no way for those two characters to have experienced that together, and then just for the story to keep going the way it was going. Something has happened, and you have to make sure that the plot shifts as a result.
Yes. Well, and same thing with that. If your characters have been like witty bantering with each other the whole time, that's probably going to feed into the bedroom too. Whatever personality traits they have are going to continue with them. They don't become completely different people.
Yeah.
We have a question I want to answer real quick before we get too far off. How do you think the new cover trend towards illustration affects this? Oh, do I have opinions?
Oh, good. Because I'm like, I don't think it does.
Couple of opinions. One, I like the book covers that I like people. I like the the actual, I can appreciate a nice shirtless dude. I'm good with that. I think when 50 Shades took off and then all of a sudden you had random objects, like Sylvia Day has one that has like cufflinks on it or something.
Tie. Yeah.
And the tie, you don't know what I'm getting into. And so you have to actually like read the blurb and that kind of thing. So I think it's important to be that those are clear. Now we have these cartoons, and for lack of a better word, they're, you know, they're very fun. And that, I think, I know the marketing behind it is that catches people's attention and that brings them in. That's where your blurb has to be very clear on what the reader is going to expect. Because I had a friend of mine, and I will not name the book, but a friend of mine sent me a link to an Amazon thing and was like, hey, look at this cover, read the blurb, and then read the look inside feature. And so the cover was an illustrated, you know, like two people or something. Honestly, I don't even remember what it was. But it was bright colors and looked like a Saturday morning cartoon type thing. And the blurb was your basic, you know, he's a bazillionaire and they're going to fall in love. And she's librarian. I don't remember. But it was this is contemporary romance. This is, you know, like you would expect some of the more popular books right now to be. And when you hit the look inside feature, the first paragraph was so graphic because it starts off with him having sex with somebody else. Oh, and like the first like opening was exactly what he was doing, where, and noises and smells. And I was like, oh my goodness.
That's not cartoony at all. Well, yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. I do think that if you're going to use an illustrated cover, you better be writing something that's pretty light and fun. Mm-hmm. I think it's great for rom-com. I think it's good for a lot of contemporary romance. I do not think it works for, obviously, erotica or for dark or suspense. So yeah, just it's part of that fulfilling the promise, right? You've got to understand what your reader is looking for in all three places. And all three of those things you mentioned are sales tools: the cover, the blurb, and the look inside. And they need to agree, and each one of them needs to offer a tiny bit more information than the other one to try to hook your reader and sell your book. So having them disagree like that is not doing them any favors.
Well, and I'm not saying you can't have an illustrated cover on a steamier contemporary. I'm saying that your blurb needs to be sure that it communicates that too. So the illustrated covers, I mean, some of them are kind of cute and they work. But whenever I look at that blurb, I need to be able to tell, and you can tell by the language that's being used. You can tell by some of the phrasing, that kind of thing, that, oh, okay, this isn't, oh, we're all going to kiss at the end and it's going to be completely fine. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's see. We talked about that sex shows another side of your character as well. We talked about that it can show a little bit different than the character that they've been presenting this whole time, but their core character is still going to be there. They're not going to completely change into somebody else.
No, but when you take your clothes off with someone for the first time, it will reveal, not just physically, but it will reveal some part of you that probably wasn't obvious before in the way that you interact. Yeah. Did I freeze? You froze a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
We both froze, I think.
Okay.
So now we've got a little bit more direct strategies, and this is what I got to do the blog post on, and this was what I think is a lot of fun. The first one is that sex scenes are not plug and play. You should not be able to pull one out of here or put it in here and it still work.
Right.
I thought you were going to get to that.
Oh, I can. I was just going to say, like, because I write rom-coms, so there's usually some kind of a running joke going on, or, you know, and I like to pull that into the sex scenes in some way. But my humor is sometimes kind of inappropriate, so that doesn't work for everybody. Have it be have there be continuity between what's going on in the book and what happens in the sex scene. It shouldn't be like,
well,
just shove this piece in here, and, you know.
And we get asked often how many sex scenes should be in a book.
Yeah, how many
are appropriate for the story. I mean,
what do your characters think? I don't know.
Right. Where do your characters, where does that fit for them? How do they feel about each other? How have you built it up? Where is it? And like we were saying, every time there is a sex scene, it changes something either about your character or your plot. So where do you need that change? You do not want to throw in a sex scene just because, oh, well, it's been 3 chapters, time for them to do it again.
I think people do. But I think that's such a plotter question to ask. And I was telling Dawn before we got live, I've been writing something kind of on the side that's fun. And I was like, and they just keep having sex. Like, I did not expect it to be this much sex. But I don't plan it usually before I write. So to me, I was just going to say the sex scenes kind of help me discover more about my characters. And so there's as many as they need to have to get my story told.
Well, and I've had several conversations with clients who are like, and then they just ended up in bed again. I didn't think that they were going to end up in bed there, but they did because he said this, and then they ended up there, and that led to this. And so it's however many fits. You shouldn't be able to just change the characters' names and put it into a different story. And again, with them not being plug and play, please vary them. Please.
Oh, yeah, please. We don't want to read the same sex scene 8 times in one book. Oh, but this time they're in the shower, Dawn, so it's okay.
Right. Yeah. So, or this time they're, out in the woods, when last time they were at the beach.
Wait. No, she's on top this time, but it's the exact same thing. No.
So I know that sounds kind of weird, but when thriller writers are writing thrillers, you have to figure out different ways to kill people. You got to figure out different ways to put the pieces of the sex scene together. And
which does not mean get as bizarre as possible.
Right.
Like when I said, oh, but she's on top, I mean like the actual, like how it all goes should be different. Not like find the weirdest position you can think of and then make them do that. Like, no.
Yeah. So you want things that are original and not the same, like first this happens, then this happens, then that happens, then this happens. You want to be sure that things are kind of mixed up a little bit. Taking a little side journey. We'll get to that in a minute on the whole. Don't come up with the most bizarre.
I'm having a lot of side journey thoughts right now. Mostly food related.
Yes.
People tend to just be like, oh, well, wouldn't it be hot if there was a pickle jar? No. Don't pickles. No.
Well, and I sent Nancy a text this week because when I wrote my blog post, I was trying to find a picture in Canva, which is like this sweet little, this is where people make pins for Pinterest app. And I put sex in there, and I'm telling you one thing, I'm never looking at a banana the same way ever again, because there are some people doing some weird stuff with food. And I shouldn't say weird. I'm not judgy. If that's your thing, you do that thing. I just was not prepared for the picture of it at 8:00 in the morning. So yeah, sex is always about emotion. It's not the choreography. And so you've got to keep the POV character. This is what drives me insane in sex scenes. If there's a POV character and if there should definitely be a POV character in the sex scene.
It's not told from the perspective of the ceiling fan, I hope.
Hopefully not. But that would be original, and I bet somebody has done it. But with your POV character, you have to keep them active, because they're having physical responses and emotions and all of these things too. And it can turn into kind of a how-to manual, because it'll be like, well, first I kissed her here and oh, she gasped. And then I, did this and oh, she responded. No, but how are you feeling? Because we're in your mind, we're experiencing it through you. And so even if it's a male POV or a female POV, you've got to get into how are they feeling? What are they experiencing? And build it up on both sides. And you have to be aware of the fact that men and women think about sex differently. And so you've got to keep those distinct.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's not just A and then B and then C and then D, and it always happens in the same order. When it happens, him doing this and her responding this way drives the next thing that happens, right? It's not automatically going to be like, oh, he kisses her here, then he kisses her there. You want it to be logical, to make sense why, it's the same thing we were talking about a second ago. I think just every sex scene should not be the same. So don't have him always do these 5 things, and make sure that as he's doing them, we see his motivation for doing them. Like she said this and it just got me so excited. I couldn't help but move right on to this.
Right. Yes. Because I realize in that situation, whole and complete thoughts are not always happening.
Well, and show that too.
But there is a reaction happening. There is. And so there's, when you have paragraphs and paragraphs of, I did this, 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 but there's no how it felt for that POV character, the reader is missing out on that experience, which is going to be more intense if you include, I did this, she did that, and wow, that was awesome. So now I did this, she did that, and you're going to include both of those reactions.
So don't just verbally written the most boring sex scene in the world, by the way. I did that. I know. She did this.
It's hard to do this and keep it like PG-13 because I can give some examples, but we're not doing that.
We're not going to do that. Okay, so what happens, Dawn, if I just really suck at this? Like, I've tried, no matter what I do, no, they suck. They're bad.
First of all, I would say consider why you're including sex scenes in your writing at all if you think you suck at it. And that's a legit question, because you don't have to have them. Yeah. And then if you're like, no, I want to get better at them, read all different styles, all different genres, until again, you find that comfort level and you find stuff that you're like, oh yeah, I can totally work this idea, not plagiarizing, of course, but I get this concept that fits well here. You can mix and match there. There's also 2 classes that I would recommend. Ronnie Loren teaches a love scene class, which she has awards and has a erotic romance and contemporary romance series. She knows exactly what she's doing. So she teaches a love scenes class. And then I recently found out that Sierra Simone also teaches a love scenes class.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's great.
And so Ronnie's is offered usually about once a year because she works it in between writing. And I think, and we can add some links to this in the comments, I think the person who was telling me about the Sierra Simone one, I'm pretty sure it's being done through the Margie Lawson Academy, but maybe not. I will look at that one before
okay. Yeah. Cool.
But we can add those links for y'all.
Okay. And so what if maybe it's just my own perception that it's bad because I'm thinking about my mom while I'm writing my sex scenes and the fact that she's going to read these?
So that's where, first of all, you just have to get over it. You're an adult. And, Kate says that she took Sierra's class last weekend and it's through RWA. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. As soon as I said that, I thought, I don't think that's right. I appreciate that.
Okay.
But you're an adult. And as long as you're writing adult, as you're an adult, you're writing about adult things. If you are in any kind of intimate relationship, or if you have produced offspring, there's a very good chance that people know you have had sex at some point in your life. So you just kind of go with it. Yeah. I've done this.
I have to just compartmentalize, like that whole thing I told you about my uncle. I don't think about him when I'm writing. Like, writing is my escape. It's my passion. It's something I do mostly for me. The fact that I publish it is a whole other thing. So when you're actually writing, hopefully you can separate yourself. Once you've planned it out, figured out your audience and your comps and all that stuff we were talking about, that market awareness piece, you can take that, put it in a box and put it over there and write and find whatever gets your juices going, literally, and just let it go, because that's how you put passion on the page. That's how you create something that's going to get your readers interested in reading more. not by thinking about your uncle reading it.
Right. Start off by writing it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Start off, and that's the best. You write it as if nobody else is going to read it, and you start off by writing it for yourself. That way, one, it's going to feel more authentic, and then it's also going to lend itself more to what you're comfortable with. And you get past the, like you said, you don't think about your uncle, you don't think about anybody else, because just like if you were writing a thriller, you're probably not going to murder someone, I would hope,
Yeah.
And so just like I'm not going to murder somebody with a bowling trophy, I probably don't have a pleasure dungeon, but I can write about that if I want.
There will be stupid people. If you ever go to signings or conferences or whatever, or if your husband mentions to his coworkers what you are doing, people will ask you if you use your husband for research or if you've really done all those things that you wrote about. Like, dumb questions happen. Just blow it off. It's part of the job.
Yeah. I do remember being with a couple of other romance writers and being in an elevator at RWA with a drunk dude.
Oh, fun.
Who was like, so what are all you ladies doing? And I don't know who this woman was. She was an author, but I don't know her. She just turned around, looked him straight in the eye and went, we're all romance writers. And we all just waited.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was just like, and he was like, okay. And he didn't say anything else.
Oh, that's good.
But we were all prepared for this. Oh, do you need some research? Do you need some? But I think he realized, like, I'm outnumbered and I should shut up now. So
yeah. I've had some interesting conference conversations with people who were not attending the conference.
Yeah. Okay.
All
so
right.
do we want to quickly go through the practical tips here?
Yes. So, number one, make sure that when your characters are going to do the thing, that they are not in the middle of a police chase or the house burning down or anything else that would potentially make it almost impossible for them to enjoy doing the thing.
Right. Yes. Women aren't good at compartmentalizing when you think your life is in danger.
Or when your baby's crying or when your boss is right next door or whatever it is.
Yes. Consent is huge.
Different than it used to be.
Yes. I can remember my grandmother read Harlequins, and I have some of like her original, like from the 70s, probably Harlequins. And it always had the guy like kissing the girl and she's like beating on his chest saying no, 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 until she finally just gives in to her internal desires. If she's saying no, he needs to back it up.
Yeah.
Because that's not something romance writers enjoy anymore. That's not something romance writers will tolerate anymore. And one of the biggest things that I've seen, especially working with new writers, is the consent needs to be more than just in her mind or his mind too, because you can't have it both ways. It needs to be, even if her mind is saying, oh, this is awesome, this is great, but but if she is saying out loud to him, no, or you need to leave, or I don't want to do this, he needs to be shown backing up. And
no means no.
That. Yes.
There's no gray areas here.
Except if you are writing really dark or some of the more taboo style where that's expected, but regular contemporary, and even in most erotic romance, the consent is expected to be there.
And if it isn't, if you're writing dubious consent, you may want to include a trigger warning or mention that in your blurb so that readers understand that's what they're getting into. Because for some people, that's a big deal, and it will make the reading of the book very unenjoyable.
Right. And then the other side of that is protection.
Has to be discussed.
Yeah, it has to be discussed. And
well, I mean, I think it depends on your situation that you're writing, not your personal situation. But I've seen situations where there's unprotected sex, like the first time the characters are together. And if there's a reason why they either know that that's going to be okay or why they don't care. And the reader understands that there's a reason. And it can be that they're just so swept up in the passion of the moment. But when that happens, usually one of them needs to think in the back of their mind while it's happening, we probably should have done this, but we were just so overwhelmed, you know, like, and it almost has to be part of the plot that like they screwed up.
I was going to say, yeah, anytime I read that, especially
You're
early,
like, secret baby.
I'm like, oh, we're having a baby. All right, let's see where this goes. And it can be handled like they can have a conversation, or it can just be a quick, with a condom on, he did this, you know?
Yeah, you don't have to make a big production out of it.
The conversation that gets a little bit more awkward is the whole let's have sex without protection conversation, because writers fall very much into, they're in the deep passion of the kissing and he's reaching for the condom and she's like, no, I'm on birth control. And he's like, but I'm clean. Let's do this. And that works. But you can vary that. That's a conversation they could have before they ended up in the bedroom.
Yeah.
Or it could be something where like, you know, each other's histories. You don't have to have that, because I'm like, really, how many times a week are you people going and getting tested for STDs? And especially where that really bothers me is if it has been set up that like the guy was a total man whore before he got with this girl, and then she's like, oh, I'm clean. I'm like, really? Because they're saying he was with like 4 other people last month. You might want to double check that.
Yeah.
So there's different ways you can handle that conversation. I like this one. Count your limbs, because
make sure there's not 6 hands involved.
Right. You don't want your reader head tilting. Count your limbs and make sure what they're doing is actually physically possible. Because some of those I'm like, I don't think you can. Is he as long as a jump rope? Because I don't think you can bend that way and turn around, and that's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
But floating hands is a big problem.
There's often too many hands. Yeah.
Yeah, too many hands. And the best. Go ahead.
Also, people take off their clothes a lot. Like she's taking it all off, but then he's taking off her bra. Like we just did that.
Well, and I always love we took off our clothes down in the kitchen. Now we're up in the bedroom, but he's reaching in his pants for the condom. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, did he run all the way back downstairs?
Yeah, think about logistics.
Yes.
Think about safety, or were you not going there yet?
Well, no, I was going to say, one of the things you can do with the counting limbs is you can act it out. And that works for fight scenes too. You can act it out with your clothes on. I mean, now I'm not responsible if you yell to your spouse, hey, baby, come in here and help me work. Whatever happens from there, we are not responsible for. But you can also, like, I do know of authors who have like Barbies that have seen some stuff.
That's why I have those elephants up there. No.
Oh, okay. There you go. I can make so many Trump jokes right now, but I won't. Yes. Safety. Shower scenes are my personal pet peeve on the safety.
Yeah. I mean, how many of us really have a lot of shower sex? Let's be honest.
Well, and it's slippery. Soapy bodies are hard to hold on to. And I can understand the shower scene as long as most people's feet stay on the floor. It's when the hero, who has not shown any signs of working out, he is not a Navy SEAL, lifts this girl up and has her against the shower wall. And I'm like, somebody's going through that glass door. This is an emergency room visit. Yeah. Waiting to happen.
Make sure that you write in those handles, those safety handles.
Yeah.
So that
or a nice shelf. They have that shelf where you put like the shampoo and stuff where you can.
Okay, but have you ever renovated a shower? How's that thing attached? Is it just like a little mortar and caulk? Because you don't want to sit on that.
I've never renovated a shower. I don't know.
Things to think about.
And then a couple of real quick, because I know we're getting close. We're running out of time. Yeah. Children, pets, roommates, your boss in the office next door, anybody who's going to hear anything. One of my favorites is if the people have a dog, because we have, I have my dog. If you come in and that dog is not crated and you start having sex on your kitchen floor, dog's going to come see what you're doing.
My dog would. I'm not going to tell you what my dog would do.
were some very awkward moments.
Yeah.
Same thing if you're doing like a single dad story, they need to have sex on the weekend that somebody else has the kid. Because if you want it to be a full out, let's enjoy this, get loud, shake the windows sex scene, kids don't sleep that heavy. And they know the moment you're about to do something, because they will come knocking on that door. Or it needs to be very controlled, and it needs to match the fact that there's somebody else in the house. And then last thing is, what were they doing before they started having sex?
I love this point. In the blog post, Dawn wrote something about chopping jalapenos. I just have a little spice on my hand. Let me.
Because my thing is, if you're doing anything dirty or sweaty or that involves chemicals or anything that,
or like chum, or you know,
if you work at
road tar,
feeding those dolphins, and think about where your hands are going, and think about where people's mouths are going, where other body parts are in. Yes, be hygienic. Take it. That's where the shower sex comes in. I mean, or at least just have somebody wash their hands. And that also goes for morning sex.
Oh, yeah.
Because first of all, when you wake up in the morning, I don't care how great last night was. You need to do two things. You need to pee and brush your teeth. Those are the first things that need to happen before anything else is going to happen. And so you can easily fill that in just by being like, she visited the bathroom. And then we just assume she took care of whatever she took care of.
Yes.
But so those are our practical tips. I loved, we talked about what to do if you're worried about somebody reading it. It's fiction. Yeah. It's not a how-to guide. You're not responsible for what anybody else thinks. If all else fails, tell them what chapters to skip. Be like, Mom, don't read chapter 12.
And if you want to keep it a secret, use a pen name and don't cross the streams.
Which is hard.
Yeah.
That's very hard to, pen names are great. And there's plenty of reasons to use one. Like if I was still writing when I was still teaching, definitely using a pen name. But just remember that it is a pen name. It is not witness protection. And it's really easy for somebody to figure out who you really are.
Yeah. And the longer you have it, the more likely somebody will figure it out. So
yes.
Anyway, okay. Well, I think we're running long, which is not a surprise on this topic. But what do we have coming up? You have a couple notes here, and I know that we planned it all out. I just didn't even remember what we were going to talk about in March. I can't believe it's March.
March is all about angst. All about, we fell in love. Now we're going to rip your heart out. And so the first show that we're having in March is going to be about finding your voice, your writing voice versus your character voice.
Oh, that's important.
And then that's going to feed into writing emotion, writing authentic character emotion, which we talked about a little bit more before. We're going to go a little bit more in depth. And then we'll have spring break. So that's where we're at.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for hanging out with us tonight. This was super fun. And if you have questions,
and you're still welcome to
always,
leave comments.
Yep. Comment, question. Dawn will link the classes that she mentioned once she figures out where they are linked. And as always, join the newsletter. Feel free to check out our classes on Teachable. You will be able to rewatch this, Melanie Davies. It will be on our website. It will be on the Facebook page, and it's on YouTube. We have a story strategy channel, so you can find us all over the place. Tell your friends.
Come hang out with us. We're fun. Yay. But thank y'all for watching, and put any questions you have in the comments.
All right. We'll see you next week. Ciao.
Bye.